You shatter your leg, no ambulance, no hospital, no painkillers waiting in a cabinet. Just you, on the ground, and the people standing around you. For most of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was Tuesday. No germ theory, no antibiotics, no x-rays to see what was actually broken inside you. And yet, somehow, your ancestors survived injuries that should have killed them. How? The answer isn't luck. It's a system. A quiet, brutal, and surprisingly sophisticated system of care that existed long before the first hospital was ever built. Start with your body itself. It already knows things. Fever raises your temperature to fight infection. Pain forces you to rest an injured limb. Nausea makes you vomit something toxic before it spreads further. These aren't malfunctions. They're ancient defense systems, tuned by millions of years of trial and error. Your ancestors didn't need to understand why fever worked. They just knew that when someone burned hot and then cooled down, they often lived. But the body can only do so much on its own. A crushed leg doesn't heal itself. A gushing wound doesn't close itself. Left alone in the open, with predators circling and infection spreading, a badly injured person in the ancient world had one real chance at survival. And it wasn't a plant or a potion. It was proximity. Someone had to stay close. But instinct alone doesn't explain everything, because the fossil record shows something stranger. It shows people who never should have survived at all. In 1957, archaeologist Ralph Selecki excavated a cave in northern Iraq called Shanidar. Inside, he found the skeleton of a Neanderthal man, now known as Shanidar I. This man had a crushed eye socket, a withered right arm, amputated below the elbow, a limp, partial deafness. By any modern measure, he was severely disabled. Here's the part that should stop you. He lived like this for years, maybe decades. In a world with no doctors, no crutches, no accommodations, someone with one working arm and partial blindness does not survive alone. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone decided again and again that his life was worth the cost of keeping him alive. That's not medicine in the way you think of it. That's something older. Call it the first form of healthcare. Other people. Anthropologist Lorna Tilley calls this the bioarchaeology of care. She studies skeletons for evidence not just of injury, but of survival after injury. Proof that a community chose to keep someone alive who could no longer contribute in the usual ways. One of her most striking cases comes from Man Bac, an archaeological site in Vietnam. There, researchers found the skeleton of a young man who had been paralyzed from the waist down, likely from childhood, and who lived for years afterward. Someone turned his body regularly to prevent bed sores. Someone fed him, cleaned him, kept him alive in a world with zero modern medicine. So the first pillar of ancient survival wasn't a plant or a potion. It was other people deciding you were worth saving. And this pattern shows up again and again across the fossil record. Older skeletons found without teeth, meaning someone had to be softening or pre-chewing their food for years. Skeletons with healed fractures so severe the person couldn't have walked, hunted, or gathered for months, yet somehow lived long enough for the bone to knit back together. Every one of these is a small, silent piece of evidence. Somebody carried water to a person who couldn't stand. Somebody sat with them through the worst of the fever. None of it was written down. All of it still shows up in the bones thousands of years later for anyone who knows how to read it. But care alone doesn't stop an infection. So what did? This is where it gets stranger and more clever than you'd expect. In 2012, biomolecular archaeologist Karen Hardy examined dental plaque, the hardened calculus, scraped from the teeth of Neanderthals, found at El Cedron Cave in Spain. Trapped inside that ancient plaque were microscopic traces of plants, yarrow, chamomile, both bitter, both nutritionally close to worthless. Both, notably, still used today for their anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Neanderthals were bitter-averse, just like you. Bitterness usually signals poison, so a species doesn't eat something unpleasant for no reason. which means they likely knew. Not with a microscope, not with a lab, but through generations of trial, memory, and observation, passed down the same way you'd learn not to touch a hot stove. Let's reconstruct a scene. It's dusk. Someone in your group has a deep gash across their thigh, torn open by a fall or a fight or an animal. There's no suturing kit, no disinfectant in a bottle. What actually happens? Someone presses a wad of moss or fibrous plant matter against the wound to slow the bleeding. Someone else may chew bitter leaves and press the pulp directly onto the skin, an early, crude antiseptic. If the wound is deep enough, some evidence even suggests early humans used a kind of cauterization, pressing something hot against the wound to seal it, agonizing, but sometimes the difference between infection and survival. Meanwhile, the injured person is kept warm, fed, and not left alone. Not because anyone understood bacteria, because everyone understood from bitter experience what tended to work and what tended to kill. That's not primitive. That's applied pattern recognition, refined over hundreds of generations, with the harshest possible feedback loop. Get it wrong, and someone dies. Get it right often enough, and the knowledge survives, passed from elder to child, the way you might teach a recipe. Childbirth followed the same brutal logic. No epidurals, no monitors tracking a heartbeat, just an experienced woman, usually someone who had already survived birth herself, guiding another through it. She'd know how to turn a breech baby by feel. She'd know which herbs slowed bleeding afterward. She'd know when to worry and when not to. This knowledge rarely appears in the fossil record directly because it lived in memory, not in stone. But population survival across tens of thousands of years tells you it existed, and that it worked often enough to keep entire lineages alive. Now here's the twist that reframes all of it. You'd assume medical knowledge only moved forward, that the deeper into prehistory you go, the more clueless people were. But archaeological evidence of skull surgery, called trepanation, cutting a hole into the living skull, dates back over 7,000 years, likely far earlier. And here's the astonishing part. Many of these skulls show clear signs of healing around the hole. Bone regrowth, which means the person didn't just survive the surgery, they lived for months, sometimes years, afterward. Think about that. With no anesthesia beyond whatever plants could dull the pain, no sterile tools, no understanding of the brain the way you do, someone cut into another person's skull, intentionally, and that person walked away alive. That's not guesswork. That's a surgical technique, tested, refined, and trusted enough to be repeated across cultures on nearly every continent. Why would anyone do this in the first place? Some researchers think it treated severe head trauma, relieving pressure from swelling after an injury. Others think it addressed seizures or headaches so debilitating the risk of surgery felt worth taking. Either way, someone had to know roughly where to cut, how deep was too deep, and how to keep the wound clean enough afterward for the skull to heal over. That's not one lucky guess. That's an actual body of medical knowledge, tested on real people and passed down deliberately. So why does this matter to you now? Scrolling through this on a device that connects you to more medical knowledge than any human in history has ever had access to. Because the instinct is still there. When you're sick, you crave comfort, warmth, someone checking in on you. That's not weakness. That's hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary programming telling you that isolation kills and community heals. When you take a painkiller for a headache, you're doing a faster, cleaner version of what your ancestors did with willow bark, which, not coincidentally, contains the same compound found in modern aspirin. You didn't inherit fragility. You inherited a survival system built by people who had almost nothing and who still managed to keep each other alive against odds that should have crushed them. Think about how much of modern medicine is still, underneath the machines and the terminology, the same three things your ancestors were doing in that cave. Reduce harm quickly. Support the body while it heals. Never let someone recover alone. A doctor washing their hands is doing a more precise version of pressing a bitter antimicrobial leaf onto a wound. A nurse checking on you every few hours is doing a more scheduled version of a Neanderthal band keeping watch over Shanidar 1. The tools changed completely. The underlying instinct didn't change at all. You shatter your leg today, and within hours, you're in a hospital bed. It feels automatic, almost boring, but it isn't automatic. It's the end result of a chain of care stretching back to a broken, one-armed man in a cave in Iraq, kept alive by people who had every reason to leave him behind and chose not to.